Hold on, I'll get somebody to help you out. Figured it out. Bet he won't do that again. Look at all of his buddies. What's up, Big Bear Nation? Welcome back to the homestead. So this is it. It's July. It's time for a garden tour. So I figured I'd bring you along and kind of show you how we've done over the last month. So many things have changed. Let's get into it. So the first place I have to start is with my sunflowers. Now granted, there's not very many of them because I had this very small bed, and that's really why I put them here, is because I really didn't have anything else that I could put there that would be of any consequence. Because even like bean plants, I mean, I'd have to put one because there's literally maybe 18 inches. So I feel like if I had packed these things full of beans, it would have been a nightmare. So I took the opportunity to plant sunflowers, and as you can see behind me, well, that one, you gotta go up real high. And it was actually a lot taller. We had some storms come through a couple days ago, and I mean, the rain came through and it was at night, and so you could see like the sunflowers were just waving. And the next morning I came out and my really tall sunflower was not so tall anymore. But that's okay because she's still just as beautiful. She took a beating and she's still standing. So there's a lot to learn from that. So this next bed, I think I had told you guys, I rescued a bunch of plants, really rescued them. They were about to be thrown away. And one of the flats that I had, actually several of the flats I had, were determinate tomatoes. And I found that what's happened is people don't really know what the benefit of having determinate tomatoes are. See, everybody's so used to having slicers and indeterminate tomatoes, and they harvest them throughout the summer. But you know, for people like us who want to put food up, determinate tomatoes are really where it's at, because in this bed right here, it has taken over the entire bed, but it is loaded down with tomatoes, and they start to turn orange one at a time, and probably within the month we'll have all of these tomatoes ready to go so that we can can them and put them away. So I was really interested in that there was a lot of determinate tomatoes that were left behind, and so I scooped those up and I've put them throughout our garden here in the front. I've just kind of splayed them out in different beds where I didn't really feel like I could do a whole lot with some of these smaller ones. And so like in this bed here, I'm probably gonna have more than enough to can some tomato sauce or some ketchup or something like that, diced tomatoes, because these are Romas. So I really learned a lot this summer by watching what other people aren't picking up and using that to our advantage. So we will definitely be keeping determinate tomatoes in our garden from now on, because like I said, here we're now in July and I'm just about ready to start canning, and I won't have to like put some in the freezer and then take them out, put some in the freezer, and then, you know, I'll be able to can these all relatively close together. So another thing that I've shown you guys in videos before is our perennial herb bed. Now, this thing has been a learning curve this year. I originally, because it was an aquaponic system, I just assumed that it would drain well, but it would still kind of keep, because of us having mulch and stuff in here, I figured it would keep the water. Well, not as well as I would have liked it to. So a couple of my plants have died off because we didn't water them as often as we should. But there are other things that did really well with minimal watering. So the lemongrass is, you know, coming up. It's super tall. It's starting to fill out, so I'm excited about that because we'll be able to do tea with that here pretty soon. My oregano is growing smaller, younger leaves, so I'm excited about that as well. It's filling in both of these beds that I put them in. The lemon balm is going crazy, so I'm about ready to start making tea for that. The mint didn't do as well as I would have liked it to, so I'm having to kind of nurse it back. But another thing that I think is crazy, and this is my second year growing this to where I really paid attention to it, is pineapple sage. This plant is going crazy. I mean, look at it. And this was from a plant that I thought was broken and was going to die back. But it actually has filled out and kind of bushed out, and it's just going crazy, and it smells absolutely amazing. I mean, it smells just like pineapple. So here pretty soon, I'm gonna have to start harvesting that. The horseradish is doing pretty good. I'm obviously not gonna dig it up right now, but the leaves are doing really well, so that's kind of an indicator to me that it's still doing okay. The basil, lost the basil. It all went to seed and it's all dried out, so I'm gonna have to plant some more of that. Now, this new bed that we put, or two beds that we put with the arch trellis, I planted some watermelon, and it's kind of slow starting, so I don't know if we're gonna get any watermelons this year. But the other thing I thought was interesting is, of these two beds, on one side, there's watermelon coming up, no problem. On this other side, now keep in mind, all of the soil, same soil. I didn't add any compost, nothing. It's all from bags that I got from the big box store. I think it was Lowe's. But in this bed, on the left-hand side, there's wood sorrel growing throughout the bed. There's like maybe 5 to 10 plants of wood sorrel. And so I thought that was really interesting. Just on this one side, I don't know if we've kicked some up from when we were mowing the grass and the seed has gone over to this side, but not on the other. But it's really strange to me. But now we have wood sorrel, so I'm gonna have to kind of yank that out and put it off to the side, maybe give it to the chickens. Of all of the things that I've got going on right now, this is probably one of my favorite beds. It is the more organized of the two beds that I was going to do, where I had a bunch of different things in the beds. If you remember from my last tour, I basically tried to plant the same kind of things in this bed and then another bed, but in this one I used more square foot methods. In that one it was a little bit more haphazard, and from what I'm seeing, the square foot method seems to be doing better. I've got zinnias that are popping up all over the place. I've got red noodle beans that are coming up finally, some Thai soldier beans. At first I was worried that they weren't really going to come, you know, they were gonna kind of get suffocated by the tomatoes. But if you look really close, you can see, let me see if you can see this. So you've got tomato leaves, but then here you have red noodle beans. There's more right here. And that's pretty cool to me. I mean, the only thing is I have to be careful because some have already gone to seed because they've gotten lost in the tomatoes. But I have eggplant growing in here. There's some cayenne peppers that have already gone bright red. So if you remember in the video where I talked about planting cool weather crops in the summer, I wanted to put some lettuce over here in this bed. That's the only patch that has really done well. This other one has kind of fallen victim to dog scratching. But this patch over here in the middle of the bed was more protected. And so it seems to be doing pretty well. I want to pull back the tomatoes a little bit more, and this pepper plant looks like it's leaning a little too, so I need to kind of stake that up. After the storm that we had, a lot of my plants really probably need a little bit extra attention because they got blown all over the place. So I'm gonna do that. But I mean, check this out. Look here. Look at that bean. Isn't that cool? They're pretty tasty too. If you've never grown these before, I would encourage you to grow them just for the sheer fact of being able to see these big, huge, you know, 18-inch beans, you know, hanging from, and they're really cool when they start to climb on a trellis. They look really neat because they hang down pretty low, and it just looks really cool. Now, on this other side of this bed, all of this is stuff that I rescued. There's a couple of determinate and then a couple of indeterminate tomatoes. Keep in mind, all these tomatoes that you're seeing, every one of them was free. I didn't pay for any of these tomato plants. I didn't plant seed. All of my seedlings got eaten by whatever, don't even know. But everything pretty much in here, all these tomatoes, peppers, I think the only thing that I planted or purchased that survived was eggplant. Everything else I got for free. So check out these, and I'm still amazed by these squash. I have these squash plants. Now keep in mind, these are the squash plants where I rehabilitated the ones that basically had been thrown away. And now these are the biggest squash plants I've ever had. They're over 4 feet wide. Some of them are 5 feet. When we get out into the big garden, I'll show you. You'll be amazed by how big these squash plants are. But they've given us close to 60 pounds of squash. And so we've been canning, dehydrating, slicing. I mean, anything you can think of, we've been doing with squash. Now, one of the problems of getting a bunch of free peppers is that some of them, I don't know what they are. So this one that's kind of this big green, light green pepper, have no idea. Not sure if it's spicy, not sure if it's a, you know, struggling bell pepper. So I guess we'll get Jason to try it and see. He'll be my guinea pig. All of these down this line right here, there's 6, I think. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So there's 6 squares, and they're about 3 feet by 3 feet squares. And this is where I've put some of those determinate tomatoes. Now, I think some of them snuck in and found that they were indeterminates, but we've just kind of let them go. Well, I let them go, and I made the mistake of not telling Jason my intentions to kind of let them go and do their own thing. And the other day he messaged me. He said, I made an executive decision. And I was like, what was your executive decision? He said, I tied up all of your tomatoes. And I was like, oh, I should have told you I didn't plan on tying them up. I wanted to kind of just let them go because I have some tomatoes that are tied up. I kind of wanted to do a little bit of an experiment and see how they did if they just were able to do their own thing. Do they get more pests? Do they get more blossom end rot? Like, what are the different things that happen? And so he tied up some of them. It looks like there's 3 of these over here are tied up. And then the one that really killed me was the wood bed that we have, that we got a couple years ago. I had just planted like 6 plants across the back side, and my plan was to just let them lay over onto the side. And basically what happened is he wanted to mow the grass to make the grass look all nice and pretty for me, but he couldn't do that with the tomatoes laying over. So he thought he was doing me a favor by tying everything up. Now, it doesn't look like it's hindered anything. I don't think I've seen any like broken branches or anything like that, but it still was one of those things where if I had communicated properly, probably wouldn't have tomatoes tied up now. In this bed right here, this was a late bed. I completely neglected to plant cucumbers, and we were going through the garden and Jason was like, where are all the cucumbers at? I went, don't think I planted any. And he's like, what? How can you have a summer garden without cucumbers? So I waited for the heat to kind of like peak up. And so now we're on the back side of it a little bit. I mean, we're still gonna get August, but I think we have plenty of time for these cucumbers to grow, get up the trellis, harvest them before it gets super hot. They're starting to throw out their tendrils, so I'm gonna kind of train them to go up the cattle panel. And then this thing behind me, this is crazy. This is a runner bean, Painted Lady, I think, or Scarlet Runner. It's one of those. But I didn't plant that. There was a plant there last year and it just self-seeded and did it again. I think I've read somewhere where this is a potential perennial bean. I'm starting to believe it because every year they plant themselves and they come back in that exact same spot every year. I'm trying to let them go to seed and let them dry so that I can use the dried beans because they're pretty decent size bean and they're really pretty. So I'm hoping to be able to use those. I'm keeping my eye on those as they dry. This bed right here was kind of emulated over the one over there. I told you that I had seen somewhere where Jess from Roots and Refuge had drawn out this beautiful way that this bed should look. And I planted all of that. I did the beans, I did the tomatoes, the marigolds, the squash, the nasturtiums, I did it all. The beans did really well, but they were bush beans, so I pulled them out. I have not replaced those yet. I'm gonna put some cowpeas in here. The pepper plant is just now starting to do okay because it was just kind of struggling. I think I have found that at least in our area, peppers seem to produce later for me. They don't come right out of the gate and start producing peppers right away for me. It seems like it's always July, August before I start getting my bumper crop of peppers. So that's one reason why I don't rush to plant my peppers in the spring, because I feel like they just kind of sit there as plants and don't do anything until July. And it seems like that's what's happened again this year. I planted this spaghetti squash. It is not doing very well. I'm going to pull it because I think it's been attacked by bugs enough that I don't think it's gonna produce anything. My marigold is crazy. It grew up super tall and now it's producing these flowers, which are just regular marigolds, but it seems like such an awkward looking plant. I'm used to them being maybe 2 feet tall, and this has got to be the better part of 4 feet. It's really strange. I've never seen a marigold get that tall. The nasturtiums are doing really good. I've had the girls try a couple of the leaves. They think it's pretty cool how they taste like black pepper. The tomatoes are doing really well. They're not getting attacked by any pests because of the nasturtiums and the marigolds. So as far as that goes, it's been a success. But the squash did not do very well. And like I said, with the beans, they produced and then it's time to pull them out. So now I have this void there I have to fill. In these 2 smaller beds, I think I had told you we had some ginger that came up. So over here in this bed, but we had not gotten any turmeric up. But now we have turmeric leaves. So I'm excited about that. It looks like there may be 5 or 6 plants in there, which is a good bit of turmeric. So I'm excited about that. It's the first year for me for growing turmeric, ginger, and horseradish. And so I'm excited to see that all 3 seem to be doing well. Now, the last thing before we go into the big garden is the bean trellis. Now, everybody's bean trellis every year seems to be epic. But I'm gonna tell you, I'm pretty proud of this bean trellis. We have had so many beans on here, and I know there's always this discussion about bush beans versus pole beans. People don't like pole beans because then they have to string them when they snap them. I have found a bean that I absolutely love, and that is the rattlesnake pole bean. Now, one reason is because I absolutely love purple. Purple is my favorite color. And rattlesnake beans do have a purple streak that runs down the length of the bean. Once they get a little bit more mature, though, they do lose that. But I planted rattlesnake pole beans on this side right here. And if you look at the overall covering of these beans, you'll see how heavy it is on this side. I planted the same amount of beans on both sides. I don't remember what type this is, but on Saturday, I didn't have any beans to harvest from this side. It's just been in the last couple of days that all of a sudden this side is starting to produce beans. So I gotta get out here and start picking, because we're gonna have a lot go to seed if I don't. This other one too, I don't know what's going on with these, but they're not climbing like the other ones. So I gotta look and see in my notes which variety this is, because it's really not climbing like these other ones are, and I was a little surprised by that. And then the other side, I'm pretty sure I just never planted beans over there. All right, so the very first thing I want to show you, I don't know if you can see over me, yeah. See all these like random corn stalks? Like, let me turn so you can see this aisle. Like, there's a couple that have kind of shown up. They kind of show up and they're not really doing anything because there's not enough of them for them to be pollinated. So I've got these big, huge stalks with no corn on them. But what has shown up in this row in huge force is birdhouse gourds. And that's because we pulled muck from the pigs to be able to put in this row. And there are so many birdhouse gourds here that we will have feed for our pigs the whole rest of the summer with no problem. And we'll still be able to put up some gourds for actual birdhouses, so that's exciting. Okay, so the last little bit here of this big garden, this big line right here is all squash plants. Now, I think I told you guys earlier, these are probably the biggest squash plants I've ever grown. Most of them span 4 to 5 feet wide. It's crazy to me, because these rows, the actual row is almost 3 feet, and they fall out onto either side of the walk path. We've already harvested like 50 to 60 pounds at least of squash from here. And while a couple of the plants are starting to die back from borers or just from the heat, there's still plenty that is still producing. So I'm sure we're gonna get still more squash. Yay! And we're planting more. Well, we're planting more zucchini and winter squash. So be looking for that next month. Now, the last thing is the tomato trellis. You can see it going straight down there. Now, if you look right here in front of me, there's plants on the ground right here. And that is because the wind came and knocked down one of the trellises. So I have to get in here pretty soon and tie this back up and get it fixed. But it looks like we've got another storm coming up behind us here, but it looks like it's gonna be short-lived. So I'm gonna wait till after the storm before I tie these guys back up. But it looks like, if I remember correctly, these couple of plants here at the end were actually determinate tomatoes. So I really don't necessarily have to tie them up as much as I have to worry about the ones further down the line. But I will tell you, they are doing amazing. They're definitely climbing up the strings. One thing I have definitely failed at is pruning as they're growing. I've gotten out there and pruned some, but I had a lot of forking. And since I wasn't really comfortable with which fork to cut, I told Jason we're just gonna get in here and grab a couple more, drop a couple more strings and pull some of these forks up so that they also have support, and we'll see how they do. But right now, I mean, I have tomatoes growing all over the place, all of these indeterminates. So here pretty soon, we're gonna have a lot of tomatoes. I think there's like 25 or 30 plants just in this line right here. But we're definitely lacking in okra, green peppers, zucchini, any kind of winter squash. We're doing okay with beans, but we're getting ready to plant more because you can never have too many beans. So that's it for this month's tour. If you liked this video, definitely go check out this video over here from our garden tour last month. So you'll be able to see just how much things have changed just in a month's time. Thank you for stopping by the Big Bear Homestead. God bless and have a nice day.